The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. Ronald Reed was a janitor in rural Vermont. He fixed cars at a gas station for 25 years and swept floors at JCPenney for 17 years. His life was as low-key as they come, but when Reed died in 2014 at age 92, that is when the humble rural janitor made international headlines. Ronald Reed died with a net worth of over $8 million. Where did he get all that money? It turned out it was no secret. There was no lottery win and no inheritance. Reed saved what he could and invested it in blue-chip stocks. Then he waited for decades as tiny savings compounded to $8 million. In this book, it will teach you that financial success is not a hard science. It's a soft skill, where how you behave is more important than what you know. No one's crazy. We all do crazy stuff with money, but no one is crazy. We all make decisions based on our own unique experiences that seem to make sense to us in the given moment. People from different generations, raised by different parents who earned different incomes and held different values in different parts of the world, learn very different lessons. If you happen to grow up when the stock market was strong, you invested more money in stocks later in life compared to those who grew up when stocks were weak. We go through life with different beliefs, goals, and forecasts. That's not because one of us is smarter than the other or has better information. It's because we had different lives shaped by different and equally persuasive experiences. We all think we know how the world works, but we've only experienced a tiny sliver of it. Luck and risk. Nothing is as good or bad as it seems. Luck and risk are siblings. They are both the reality that every outcome in life is guided by forces other than individual effort. They both happen because the world is too complex to allow 100% of your actions to dictate 100% of your outcomes. The line between inspiringly bold and foolishly reckless can be a millimeter thick and only visible with hindsight. We should recognize the role of luck in success, and the role of risk means we should forgive ourselves and leave room for understanding when judging failures. Nothing is as good or bad as it seems. Never enough. When rich people do crazy things. There seems to be no limit today on what enough entails. There is no reason to risk what you have and need for what you don't have and don't need. The hardest financial skill is getting the goalpost to stop moving. It gets dangerous when the taste of having more money, more power, more prestige, increases ambition faster than satisfaction. In that case, one step forward pushes the goalpost 2 steps ahead. You feel as if you're falling behind, and the only way to catch up is to take greater and greater amounts of risk. Accept that you might have enough, even if that's less than those around you. Enough is realizing that the insatiable appetite for more will push you to the point of regret. This can be as innocent as burning out at work or a risky investment allocation you can't maintain. Whatever it is, the inability to deny a potential dollar will eventually catch up to you. Confounding Compounding. $81.5 billion of Warren Buffett's $84.5 billion net worth came after his 65th birthday. Our minds are not built to handle such absurdities. Warren Buffett is a phenomenal investor, but the real key to his success is that he's been a phenomenal investor for 3/4 of a century. His skill is investing, but his secret is time. That's how compounding works. If something compounds, a small starting base can lead to results so extraordinary they seem to defy logic. Good investing isn't necessarily about earning the highest returns, because the highest returns tend to be one-off hits that can't be repeated. It's about earning pretty good returns that you can stick with, and which can be repeated for the longest period of time. That's when compounding runs wild. Getting wealthy versus staying wealthy. Good investing is not necessarily about making good decisions. It's about consistently not screwing up. Getting money is one thing, keeping it is another. Capitalism is hard, but part of the reason this happens is because getting money and keeping money are 2 different skills. Getting money requires taking risks, being optimistic, and putting yourself out there. But keeping money requires the opposite of taking risks. It requires humility and fear that what you've made can be taken away from you just as fast. It requires frugality and an acceptance that at least some of what you've made is attributed to luck, so past success can't be relied on to repeat indefinitely. Tails, you win. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. Long tails, the farthest ends of a distribution of outcomes, have tremendous influence in finance, where a small number of events can account for the majority of outcomes. Take the distribution of success among large public stocks over time. Most public companies are duds, a few do well, and a handful becomes extraordinary winners that account for the majority of the stock market returns, such as Amazon and Apple. At the Berkshire Hathaway shareholder meeting in 2013, Warren Buffett said he owned 400 to 500 stocks during his life and made most of his money on 10 of them. When you accept tails drive everything in business, investing, and finance, you realize that it's normal for a lot of things to go wrong, break, fail, and fall. Freedom. Controlling your time is the highest dividend money pays. The highest form of wealth is the ability to wake up every morning and say, I can do whatever I want today. The ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want, is priceless. It's the highest dividend money pays. Money's intrinsic value is its ability to give you control over your time. Man in the car paradox. No one is impressed with your possessions as much as you are. When you see someone driving a nice car, you really think, wow, the guy driving the car is so cool. Instead, you think, wow, if I had the car, people would think I'm cool. People tend to want wealth to signal to others that they should be liked and admired, but in reality, those people often bypass admiring you, not because they don't think wealth is admirable, but because they use your wealth as a benchmark for their own desire to be liked and admired. If respect and admiration are your goal, be careful how you seek it. Humility, kindness, and empathy will bring you more respect than horsepower ever will. Wealth is what you don't see. Spending money to show people how much money you have is the fastest way to have less money. We tend to judge wealth by what we see, because that's the information we have in front of us. We can't see people's bank accounts or brokerage statements, so we rely on outward appearances to gauge financial success. Cars, homes, Instagram photos. But the truth is that wealth is what you don't see. Wealth is financial assets that haven't yet been converted into stuff you see. There is a difference between wealthy and rich. Rich is a current income. Someone driving a $100,000 car is almost certainly rich, because even if they purchase that car with debt, you need a certain level of income to afford the monthly payment. Same with those who live in big homes. It's not hard to spot rich people. But wealth is hidden. It's income not spent. Wealth is an option not yet taken to buy something later. Its value lies in offering you options, flexibility, and growth to one day purchase more stuff than you could right now. The world is filled with people who look modest but are actually wealthy, and people who look rich who live at the razor's edge of insolvency. Keep this in mind when quickly judging others' success and setting your own goals. Save money. The only factor you can control generates one of the only things that matter. How wonderful. A high savings rate means having lower expenses than you otherwise could, and having lower expenses means your savings go further than they would if you spent more. Past a certain level of income, what you need is just what sits below your ego. Everyone needs the basics. Once they're covered, there's another level of comfortable basics. One of the most powerful ways to increase your savings rate isn't to raise your income, it's to raise your humility. When you define savings as the gap between your ego and your income, you realize why many people with decent incomes have so little. It's a daily struggle against instincts to extend your peacock feathers to the outermost limits and keep up with others doing the same. Reasonable over rational. Aiming to be mostly reasonable works better than trying to be coldly rational. You're not a spreadsheet, you're a person, a screwed up, emotional person. Do not aim to be coldly rational when making financial decisions. Aim to be just pretty reasonable. Reasonable is more realistic, and you have a better chance of sticking with it for the long run, which is what matters most when managing money. Surprise. History is the study of change, ironically used as the map of the future. It is smart to have deep appreciation for economic and investing history. History helps us calibrate our expectations, study where people tend to go wrong, and offers a rough guide to what tends to work. But it is not in any way a map of the future. That doesn't mean we should ignore history when thinking about money. But there's an important nuance. The further back in history you look, the more general your takeaways should be. General things like people's relationship to greed and fear, how they behave under stress, and how they respond to incentives tend to be stable in time. The history of money is useful for that kind of stuff. Room for error. The most important part of every plan is planning in your plan, not going according to plan. Room for error lets you enjoy a range of potential outcomes, and endurance lets you stick around long enough to let the odds of benefiting from a low probability outcome fall in your favor. The biggest gains occur infrequently, so the person with enough room for error in part of their strategy to let them endure the hardship has an edge over the person who gets wiped out when they are wrong. The idea is that you have to take risks to get ahead, but no risk that can wipe you out is ever worth taking. You'll change. Long-term planning is harder than it seems because people's goals and desires change over time. Long-term financial planning is essential, but things change, both the world around you and your goals and desires. Embrace the idea that financial goals made when you were a different person should be abandoned without mercy versus being put on life support and dragged on. This can be a good strategy to minimize future regret. The quicker it's done, the sooner you can get back to compounding. Nothing's free. Everything has a price, but not all prices appear on labels. Like everything else worthwhile, successful investing demands a price, but its currency is not dollars and cents. It's volatility, fear, doubt, uncertainty, and regret, all of which are easy to overlook until you're dealing with them in real time. Thinking of market volatility as a fee rather than a fine is an important part of developing the kind of mindset that lets you stick around long enough for investing gains to work in your favor. The trick is to convince yourself that the market's fee is worth it. That's the only way to deal with volatility and uncertainty. You and me. Beware of taking financial cues from people playing a different game than you are. When investors have different goals and time horizons, prices that look ridiculous to one person can make sense to another, because the factors those investors pay attention to are different. Take the dot-com and housing bubble. Bubbles do their damage when long-term investors playing one game start taking their cues from those short-term traders playing another. What you don't realize is that the traders who are setting the market price of the stock are playing a different game than you are. You need to understand your own time horizon and not be persuaded by the actions and behaviors of people playing a different game than you. The seduction of pessimism. Optimism sounds like a sales pitch. Pessimism sounds like someone trying to help you. Pessimism just sounds smarter and more plausible than optimism. There are a lot of overnight tragedies. There are rarely any overnight miracles. Growth is driven by compounding, which always takes time. Destruction is driven by single points of failure, which can happen in seconds. It's easier to create a narrative around pessimism because stories tend to be fresher and more recent. Optimistic narratives require looking at a long stretch of history and developments, which people tend to forget, and it takes more effort to piece together. When you'll believe anything. Appealing fictions and why stories are more powerful than statistics. The more you want something to be true, the more likely you are to believe a story that overestimates the odds of it being true. The bigger the gap between what you want to be true and what you need to be true to have an acceptable outcome, the more you are protecting yourself from falling victim to an appealing financial fiction. All together now. What we've learned about the psychology of our own money. Here are a few short recommendations that can help you make better decisions with your money. Go out of your way to find humility when things are going right and forgiveness and compassion when they go wrong. Nothing is as good or bad as it looks. The world is big and complex. Respect the power of luck and risk, and you'll have a better chance on focusing on things that you can control. Less ego, more wealth. Saving is the gap between your ego and your income, and wealth is what you don't see. No matter how much you earn, you will never build wealth unless you can put a lid on how much fun you can have with the money you have right now. Manage your money in a way that helps you sleep at night. Some people won't sleep well unless they're earning the highest returns. Others will only get a good rest if they're conservatively invested. To each their own. If you want to do better as an investor, the single most powerful thing you can do is increase your time horizon. Time is the most powerful force in investing. It makes little things grow big and big mistakes fade away. Become okay with a lot of things going wrong. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. A small minority of things account for the majority of outcomes. Use money to gain control over your time. Having control of your time is such a powerful contributor to happiness. Be nicer and less flashy. No one is impressed with your possessions as much as you are. Save. Just save. You don't need a specific reason to save. Everyone's life is a continuous chain of surprises. Define the cost of success and be ready to pay it, because nothing worthwhile is free. Worship room for error. It gives you endurance, and endurance is what makes compounding magic over time. You should like risk because it pays off over time. But you should still be careful of risks that wipe you out, as it prevents you from taking future risks that will pay off over time. Define the game you're playing, and make sure your actions are not influenced by people playing a different game. Respect the mess. There is no single right answer, just the answer that works for you.